The endless expanse of space was a void punctuated by twinkling stars and the occasional whisper of a passing comet. Amidst this vast emptiness, humanity's insatiable hunger for resources had driven them further and further from their home planet, Earth. The year was 2165, and the blue planet had long since exhausted its reserves, prompting humanity to look to the stars for salvation. The galactic exploration vessel Horizon floated silently through the cosmos, a sleek, silver arrow slicing through the darkness. Its mission, to find new worlds rich in resources to fuel Earth's ever-growing needs. On board the vessel, Commander Victor Marquez stood in the observation deck, his gaze fixed on the star-studded vista before him. A veteran of countless missions, Victor was a man of steel and resolve, his chiseled features reflecting the hard decisions he had made in his lifetime. "Commander Marquez, you might want to see this," a voice crackled over the intercom. It was Dr. Elena Werner, the ship's lead scientist. Victor turned from the viewport and made his way through the labyrinthine corridors of the Horizon, each step echoing softly against the metal floors. He entered the science lab, where Dr. Werner and her team were huddled around a holographic display. The image floating in the air showed a planet, lush and vibrant, with swirling blue oceans and expansive green forests. "We've found something remarkable," Dr. Werner said, her eyes alight with excitement. "This planet, designated Nyra 14, is teeming with natural resources. Preliminary scans indicate vast deposits of rare minerals, hydrocarbons, and other critical materials." Victor studied the hologram, his mind racing. "What's the catch?" he asked, his voice tinged with skepticism. He had learned long ago that nothing in the universe came without a price. Dr. Werner hesitated. "The planet is inhabited," she said finally, "by an indigenous species. They are less technologically advanced than us, but they have a complex society and a deep connection to their environment." Victor frowned. "Have we established contact?" "Not yet," Dr. Werner admitted. "We need to proceed carefully. Our scans show they are a peaceful people, but we can't predict how they'll react to our presence." Victor nodded, his mind already strategizing. "Prepare a diplomatic team. We need to approach this delicately. If we can secure their cooperation, it will be beneficial for both sides." As the Horizon descended through Nyra's atmosphere, the crew marveled at the planet's beauty. Verdant forests stretched as far as the eye could see, interspersed with sparkling rivers and majestic mountain ranges. The air was clean and crisp, a stark contrast to the polluted skies of Earth. The landing party, composed of scientists, diplomats, and a small contingent of soldiers, set foot on Nerian soil with a mixture of awe and trepidation. They were greeted by a group of Nerians, their skin a soft shade of lavender, their eyes large and expressive. They wore garments made from natural fibers, adorned with intricate patterns and symbols. One of the Nerians stepped forward, her presence commanding and serene. She introduced herself as Lyra, the spiritual leader of her people. Through a translator device, she welcomed the humans and expressed a cautious curiosity about their intentions. "We come in peace," Victor said, stepping forward. "We seek to establish a mutually beneficial relationship with your people. Our planet is in dire need of resources, and we believe we can offer you technological advancements and medical aid in exchange." Lyra listened, her eyes thoughtful. "Our land is sacred," she replied. "We have lived in harmony with it for generations. We must discuss your proposal with our council." Over the next few days, the humans were given a glimpse into Nerian life. They witnessed the Nerians' deep spiritual connection to their environment, their sustainable way of living, and their rich cultural traditions. Victor found himself increasingly conflicted as he saw the Nerians' harmonious existence. Negotiations began, but they were fraught with tension. The Nerians were wary of human intentions, and rightfully so. Victor pushed for a peaceful agreement, but the pressure from Earth's authorities was mounting. They demanded results, and they demanded them quickly. One evening, as Victor walked through a serene Nerian forest, he encountered Lyra again. She was meditating by a crystal-clear stream, her expression one of deep contemplation. "Commander," she greeted him, "what do you see when you look at our world?" Victor hesitated before answering. I see a paradise, he admitted, a world untainted by greed and corruption. But I also see resources that could save my people. Lyra nodded. And at what cost? We are willing to share, but not to be exploited. Our ways may be different, but our right to exist in harmony with our world is no less important than your need for resources. Her words struck a chord deep within Victor. For the first time, he questioned the righteousness of his mission. As he returned to the horizon that night, he knew that the path ahead would not be easy. The stakes were higher than ever, and the fate of an entire planet hung in the balance. Victor Marquez, a man once driven solely by duty, now faced a moral dilemma that would challenge everything he believed in. The discovery of Nairo was not just a find of resources, but a test of humanity's true nature. And so, the seeds of conflict were sown, setting the stage for a battle not just of arms, but of ideals and principles. The journey had begun, and there was no turning back. In the dim glow of the control room, the holographic map of Naira floated, suspended in midair, casting azure and emerald hues across the faces of those who watched it with ravenous interest. At the heart of this eager assembly was the conglomerate of Earth's finest minds and greediest souls, a coalition of military strategists and corporate magnates. They circled the map like predators around vulnerable prey, their eyes reflecting a glint not unlike that of the precious minerals hidden beneath Nira's lush surface. Victor Marquez stood slightly apart, his gaze fixed on the rotating globe. He was a man who carried his years and experiences like medals, his posture upright, his eyes sharp. As the chief commander of the expeditionary forces, Victor's reputation preceded him, known both for his tactical brilliance and an unyielding adherence to duty. Yet, as he observed the planet that was about to become his battleground, a subtle furrow creased his brow, an indication of a storm brewing within, quiet but potent. The scans are conclusive, announced Dr. Helen Pierce, the lead geologist, her voice slicing through the murmur of conversations. Nira's veins are rich with iridexium, a rare mineral absent on Earth but vital for our quantum drive technologies. The reserves here could power our cities for centuries. Murmurs of approval hummed around the room, the implications clear and the excitement palpable. Yet the mention of such wealth being hoarded by what they termed a primitive species twisted the atmosphere with a complexity that made even the most hardened hearts briefly falter. Victor turned his attention to a smaller screen displaying a live feed from a reconnaissance drone. The camera panned over a Nerian village, the structures organically integrated into the surrounding jungle, almost invisible at a casual glance. The Nerians themselves appeared, their movements harmonious with the rhythm of their world, tall figures with luminous skin that caught the planet's twin suns, casting reflections that made them seem part of the very air itself. Do we have any idea of their capabilities? Victor asked, his voice betraying no hint of the doubt that gnawed at him. Intellectually inferior, technologically primitive, responded General Hartman, the operations military overseer, with a dismissive wave of his hand. They have no space travel capabilities, limited machinery, and their energy sources are basic. We're not expecting significant resistance. Victor watched a group of Nerian children play among the towering ferns, their laughter audible even through the drone's feed. His mind juxtaposed these innocent beings with the impending invasion, a discord that settled heavily on his shoulders. As the meeting drew to a close, plans were laid with surgical precision. Entry points, resource extraction zones, and potential settlement areas were mapped out. The executives talked profit margins while the military strategists discussed deployment tactics. Victor contributed where necessary, his expertise shaping the plan into something even more formidable. The invasion was set to commence at dawn. The fleet was ready, an array of spacecraft armed and awaiting the command to tear through the sky. Victor spent the last night aboard the command ship, the weight of the coming days heavy in his chest. He wandered the silent corridors, the soft hum of the ship's engines, a stark contrast to the turmoil within him. As the first light of morning painted the sky in hues of fire and gold, the fleet descended upon Naira. The initial phase was clinical, almost eerily quiet. Orbital stations were established, and ground troops began their silent march into Nerian territory. But the silence broke when the first village was encroached upon. The Nerians, taken by surprise, could only watch in frozen disbelief as machines tore through their land, ripping soil and flora alike. The air vibrated with the sound of chainsaws and drilling rigs, a cacophony that drowned out the natural harmony of Naira. Victor stood at the forefront, his every command shaping the course of the invasion. Yet, each order given, each advancement made, felt like a betrayal of the very essence of what he once vowed to protect as a young officer. The dignity of life, the sovereignty of a people. As the sun set on the first day of the invasion, the skies of Nera bled red, mirroring the turmoil on Victor's face. It was a victory, if it could be called that, but the taste it left was ashen. For in the shadows of the towering trees, hidden from the invaders' eyes, the Nerians gathered, their faces set with a resolve born of desperation and the primal need to protect their home. And so, the stage was set, not just for a battle of territory, but for a clash of wills, where the heart of a man like Victor Marquez would be tested against the very essence of human greed and the indomitable spirit of the Nerians. Under the sterile white lights of the command center, Victor Marquez studied the holographic maps floating before him, his face set in a grim mask of determination. The maps displayed the lush landscapes of Naira, now overlaid with strategic markers and troop movements. Victor, a seasoned commander with medals that told of victories and sacrifices, found himself in command of one of humanity's farthest-reaching arms, a force intended not to explore, but to exploit. Victor was a tall, imposing figure, his uniform always pristine, the silver at his temples giving him a distinguished air that commanded respect. His eyes, once bright and curious in his youth, now carried the weight of many campaigns that were successful, but not without cost. As he adjusted the deployment lines with a flick of his wrist, his second-in-command, Lieutenant Grace Dawson, approached him. "The troops are ready to move on your command, sir," she reported, her voice crisp and professional. "Thank you, Lieutenant. Keep the men on high alert. We don't know what these Nerians are capable of," Victor replied without looking away from the map. His mind was a fortress of strategy and foresight, but deep down, a small voice whispered doubts about their mission. It was a voice he had learned to suppress. Later, as Victor strode through the base, the clamor of machinery and the distant hum of spacecraft engines filled the air. The base was a hive of activity, a stark contrast to the tranquil beauty of Naira visible beyond the reinforced walls. Victor paused for a moment, gazing out at the alien world. The planet's vibrant forests and vast oceans were breathtaking, but to him, they were resources waiting to be harvested. That night, Victor sat alone in his quarters, the only sound the soft tapping of his fingers on the tablet before him. He was reviewing reports from Earth, outlining the critical energy shortages threatening their way of life. The burden of responsibility weighed heavily on him. His decisions could save his people or condemn them. He poured himself a drink, the amber liquid catching the light as he swirled the glass, lost in thought. The following morning brought the first skirmish. Nerian warriors, cloaked in the colors of their forested home, launched a surprise attack on an outpost. Victor was on the ground within the hour, surveying the aftermath. The air was thick with the acrid smell of smoke and scorched earth. "Sir, we underestimated their combat readiness," a young officer reported, visibly shaken by the encounter. Victor surveyed the damage, his expression unreadable. He knelt beside the body of a fallen Nerian, examining the primitive yet effective weaponry clutched in the alien's rigid hand. There was an artistry to it, a harmony with the environment that Victor's own technology lacked. "We will adjust our strategies accordingly," he said finally, standing up, "and get me more intel on their tactics and culture. I want to know who we are dealing with." As the days turned into weeks, the conflict deepened. Victor found himself increasingly on the front lines, leading his troops against an enemy that fought with desperate bravery. Each encounter with the Nerians left him with a growing respect for their resilience, and a gnawing question about the righteousness of his cause. One evening, as the sun set over Naira, casting long shadows over the land, Victor stood at the edge of the base, watching the twilight engulf the world. The beauty of the planet, so full of life and vigor, seemed to mock the desolation brought by his forces. It was during one of these reflective moments that an urgent message reached him. An ambush had captured several of his men. As he prepared to lead the rescue, Victor felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. He was a commander trained to fight, to win at all costs, but the eyes of the Nerians he had met in battle haunted him. They fought not for conquest, but for survival. That night, under the cover of darkness, Victor led his team into the heart of Naira. It was here, in the looming shadow of the great Nerian forests, that the course of his life would take an unexpected turn, leading him down a path of doubt, revelation, and ultimately, redemption. The morning on Naira was a symphony of colors. Shades of vermilion and cerulean mingled in the sky, painting a backdrop of alien beauty that seemed almost in mockery of the dark purpose that had brought the humans here. As the first rays of sunlight crept over the rugged hills, the distant hum of machinery shattered the tranquility. The human forces were up early, and their intentions were clear. They were here to take, not to admire. In the heart of the encampment, Commander Victor Marquez surveyed the unfolding chaos with a cold, strategic eye. Around him, soldiers clad in metallic armor hustled, their boots thudding heavily on the compacted soil of this foreign land. Drones buzzed overhead, scanning the landscape for signs of Nerian activity. To an outsider, it might appear a well-oiled machine of war, but Victor felt a knot of unease tightening within him. He couldn't help but wonder about the morality of their mission. Was this relentless exploitation justified by mere need? His thoughts were interrupted by Lieutenant Harrow, a young officer whose sharp features were often set in a look of intense focus. "Commander, we've encountered resistance at the eastern ridge. The Nerians are pushing back, harder than expected." Victor nodded, his expression unreadable. "Show me." The two men made their way to a temporary command station, where digital maps flickered with real-time data. The eastern ridge was highlighted, pulsating with red indicators that marked the presence of Nerian defenders. "They're using guerrilla tactics," Harrow explained, pointing at the screen where the icons of Nerian fighters appeared and vanished sporadically. "They know the terrain better than our scouts. We've lost 2 units already this morning." Victor's gaze was icy as he studied the movements. The Nerians were indeed a formidable enemy, resourceful and unexpectedly organized. It wasn't just their knowledge of the land. There was a desperation in their fight, a determination that could only stem from fighting for one's home. "Prepare the squads. We're going in," Victor ordered, his voice devoid of hesitation. Despite his inner conflicts, duty called with a voice too imperative to ignore. The journey to the eastern ridge was tense, with the armored vehicles kicking up clouds of red dust that hung heavy in the alien air. Victor's unit disembarked at the foot of the ridge, the rocky terrain offering little cover. The commander himself led the advance, his rifle at the ready, his senses sharpened by the anticipation of imminent conflict. No sooner had they begun their ascent than a flurry of arrows, crudely made but deadly accurate, rained down from the ridge. Victor felt a surge of adrenaline as he dodged, narrowly escaping a lethal strike. Around him, his soldiers were not so fortunate. Several cried out as they were hit. "Take cover," Victor barked, leading his men to the relative safety of a jagged rock formation. This was no ordinary skirmish. It was a statement from the Nerians. They would not yield their home without a fierce struggle. From their cover, Victor could see glimpses of their attackers. The Nerians were unlike any foe he had previously encountered. Their skin shimmered with the hues of the planet itself, blues, greens, and grays that camouflaged them perfectly with the natural environment. They moved with an agility that was both graceful and lethal. A pause in the onslaught gave Victor a moment to think. He signaled to his men to hold their fire. Stepping out into the open, he raised his hands in a gesture of temporary truce. "I am Commander Victor Marquez," he shouted towards the ridge, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "I wish to speak with your leader." Silence greeted his proposal. Then slowly, a figure detached itself from the landscape, standing tall on the ridge. It was a Nerian, his features stern and commanding, his eyes reflecting a tumultuous sea of anger and courage. I am Solan, protector of this land, the Nerean called back. Why should we parley with thieves and destroyers? Victor felt the weight of those words. Here, in the heart of the conflict, the stark reality of their invasion was undeniable. He took a deep breath, choosing his words with care. We came for resources, not for blood. Is there a way to coexist, to share what Naira offers? Victor's voice was firm yet open, an olive branch extended in the midst of strife. Solan's gaze was unwavering. Your machines tear at the soul of Naira. Your greed poisons our wells. What peace can be found with such as you? The question hung in the air, poignant and challenging. Victor knew that this was more than a tactical standoff. It was a moral crossroads. The choices made here on this alien ridge, under the watchful eyes of two civilizations, would shape the future of Nera. For the first time in his long career, Victor Marquez doubted the righteousness of his cause. As he stood there, a figure of war against a backdrop of natural beauty and fierce resistance, the path forward was unclear. But one thing was certain. This conflict was about more than resources. It was about the soul of a planet and the heart of a commander caught between duty and conscience. The dawn was still hours away when the heavy boots of the human forces began their march across the craggy terrain of Naira. The dim twin moons cast long shadows over the soldiers' forms, blurring the distinction between man and machine. Above, the sky was a swirling tapestry of cobalt and black, punctuated by the gleaming dots of starships aligned in combat formation. It was under this alien night sky that Commander Victor Marquez stood before his troops, his gaze hard and unyielding as the planet itself. Victor's voice cut through the crisp air, his orders clear and sharp. This is not just about resources, he began, rallying his troops with the weight of their purpose. It's about establishing order, about bringing the advancements of human civilization to a world that knows nothing of its benefits. His words were met with nods and murmurs of agreement, the soldiers' resolve fortified by the conviction of their cause. As the first light of dawn tinged the horizon with a faint glow, the siege began. Artillery units positioned in the rear lobbed incendiary devices over the makeshift barricades the Nereans had erected. Explosions blossomed like deadly flowers, throwing up debris and shrouding the battlefield in thick smoke. From Victor's vantage point, the initial barrage was a success, softening the outer defenses as planned. Meanwhile, squads of infantry moved forward in tight formations, their armored suits gleaming under the emerging sunlight. The ground shook under the weight of the mechanized battalions that rolled over the rough landscape, their treads tearing through the alien flora. It was a spectacle of power and precision, a testament to human engineering and strategic prowess. However, as the human forces advanced, unexpected resistance began to manifest. The Nereans, though technologically inferior, were not unprepared. They emerged from hidden crevices and underground burrows, their figures swift and agile against the cumbersome human invaders. Using the terrain to their advantage, they launched guerrilla attacks that harried the flanks of the advancing army. Victor watched the unfolding chaos with a growing sense of unease. His helmet's visor displayed real-time data, blinking warnings and casualty reports that increased by the minute. He had underestimated the Nereans, a mistake that gnawed at his pride as a military strategist. Gritting his teeth, he issued new orders, directing aerial scouts to pinpoint the insurgents' hideouts. From above, drones dipped and dived, their cameras piercing through the canopies of dense foliage to reveal the hidden network of Nerean defenses. Armed with this new intelligence, Victor coordinated a more focused assault. Heavy bombers roared overhead, their payloads designed not just to destroy, but to demoralize. As the dust settled from the aerial onslaught, a haunting silence fell over the battlefield. The initial hubbub of the invasion had given way to an eerie calm, broken intermittently by the distant cries of wounded soldiers and aliens alike. Victor advanced with a contingent of his elite guard, their steps cautious as they navigated through the devastated landscape. It was in the shadow of a smoldering tree that Victor first witnessed the cost of the siege. A young Nerean lay wounded, her breathing shallow and labored. Beside her, a human soldier reached out, his hand trembling as he offered water from his flask. The scene unfolded before Victor's eyes, a poignant reminder of the individual suffering behind the grand strategy of war. The commander turned away, his mind a tumult of strategy and sorrow. This war, he realized, was not as black and white as the briefings made it seem. Each step forward on this alien soil drew him deeper into a gray area, challenging his beliefs about duty and dominion. As Victor rejoined his troops, preparing to press further into the heart of Nira, he carried with him the weight of the morning's revelations. The battle for Nira was not just a clash of civilizations, but a confrontation with his own humanity, a test he was only just beginning to understand. As dawn crept over the jagged skyline of Nira, its first light caught the metallic glint of human armaments, a stark contrast against the lush viridian canopies. The human forces had established a temporary camp at the edge of the Dal forest, a strategic position close to a major Nerian village. Victor Marquez stood outside his tent, gazing solemnly at the alien landscape. The beauty of the planet tugged at a hidden, weary part of him, a reminder of what was at stake. Victor's thoughts were interrupted by Lieutenant Reynolds, his second-in-command, who approached with a cautious gait. "Commander, the scouts are back. They report no signs of Nerian activity within a 3-mile radius." "Good," Victor responded, his voice devoid of relief. He had learned to trust the silence of Nira as much as a lull before a storm. "Keep the men on high alert, Lieutenant. These forests are not as empty as they seem." As Reynolds nodded and walked away, Victor's gaze lingered on the dense tree line, a gnawing suspicion brewing within him. He ordered his soldiers to double their patrols, his instincts warning him of an imminent threat. Later that morning, as the heat began to settle heavily around them, the tranquility was shattered. A sudden, piercing cry echoed through the forest, a signal. Before Victor could react, the ground erupted around him. Explosive traps, cleverly hidden beneath the foliage, detonated in a series of thunderous roars. Through the chaos, Nerian warriors, their bodies painted in the hues of the forest, surged forward like a torrent of vengeance. Victor and his men were caught completely off guard. The Nerians had used the terrain to their advantage, appearing almost out of nowhere. Their attack was precise and coordinated, aimed to incapacitate rather than kill. Victor found himself admiring their strategy even as he fought for his life. In the midst of the battle, a Nerian fighter's blade came arcing towards Victor. He managed to deflect the strike with his rifle, but the force of the blow sent him stumbling backward. Another explosion nearby sent him to the ground, dazed and disoriented. As he tried to regain his bearings, he felt the cold press of a blade against his throat and looked up into the fierce eyes of a Nerian warrior. "Do not move, human," the warrior hissed in broken interstellar common. Victor stayed still, recognizing the futility of resistance. Around him, he saw that his soldiers had also been subdued, rounded up by the Nerians with surprising efficiency. Instead of the killing blow, Victor was dragged to his feet and bound with ropes made from a fibrous plant. The same was done to his men. They were marched through the forest, the canopy above blotting out the sun intermittently, casting intricate shadows that danced around them. Victor's mind raced, but his soldiers' discipline kept him calm, observant. The march ended at a hidden Nerian encampment, ingeniously camouflaged within the forest itself. Victor and his captured soldiers were pushed into a rudimentary but sturdy holding area. Despite their situation, Victor noted there was no mistreatment. The Nerians offered them water and attended to the wounded, their actions governed by a strict code of honor. Among the Nerians, a figure approached, a female with a demeanor that commanded respect. Her attire was less a warrior's and more a healer's, adorned with symbols that glowed faintly. She began to tend to the injured, her hands moving with practiced ease. When she reached Victor, her touch was gentle yet assured, applying a cool herbal paste to his wounds. "Why do you invade us?" she asked quietly, her tone more curious than accusatory. Victor met her gaze, struck by the sincerity in her eyes. "We were told you were savages, that you would kill us without provocation," he confessed, the irony of his words not lost on him. She nodded slowly, her eyes sad. "And yet here you are, your life in our hands, and we heal you. What does that make us?" Victor had no answer. As the healer moved on, her question lingered in the air, heavy with implications. That night, as he lay in captivity under the alien stars, Victor couldn't shake the feeling that everything he had believed, everything he had believed, everything he had fought for, was built on a foundation of lies. The Nereians, with their dignified restraint and unexpected kindness, had sown a seed of doubt in him, a doubt that would grow into a powerful, transformative force. Victor Marquez lay on a bed of woven reeds in a dimly lit room, his body battered but slowly healing under the careful ministrations of Lyra, the Nerian nurse. The walls, made of an earthen mixture unique to Nyra, emitted a soft, amber glow, lending a warm ambience to the otherwise Spartan quarters. The air was thick with the fragrance of emra, a local herb the Nerians burned for its antiseptic properties. Victor's head throbbed in time with his heartbeat, and each breath he took was laced with the pungent, smoky scent. He was roused from his stupor by a gentle touch on his arm. Lyra was checking the bandages wrapped tightly around his torso. Her hands moved with practiced ease and a gentleness that seemed at odds with the rugged world outside. Victor's gaze traveled over her features, her large, expressive eyes that shimmered like the twin moons of Nyra in the low light, and her skin, a pale, luminescent blue, that seemed to absorb the glow of the walls. "Try to stay still," Lyra murmured, her voice a soothing melody that contrasted sharply with the gruff orders of his military superiors. Victor nodded, his eyes fixed on her. Lyra paused, a slight frown creasing her brow. "And what did you expect?" she asked, her tone light yet probing. "Hostility, perhaps resentment," Victor replied, his honesty surprising even himself. "Not this." Lyra resumed her work, her movements deliberate. "We Nerians believe in the sanctity of life. It extends to all, even to those who might not extend the same courtesy to us." Her words struck a chord within Victor. He had been trained to see the Nerians as simple, almost primitive beings, whose only value lay in the resources their planet harbored. Yet here he was, at their mercy, being treated with a dignity he wasn't sure he deserved. "Tell me about your people, Lyra. Help me understand." For the next several hours, Lyra spoke of Nyra's history, its culture, and its people's deep-rooted connection to their land. She told him about the rhythms of Nerian life, so intricately tied to the cycles of nature, about their celebrations and their mourning rituals, about the legends that children grew up listening to under starlit skies. As she spoke, the room seemed to expand, filled with the colors, sounds, and emotions of a world Victor had never taken the time to understand. Lyra's voice, enriched with pride and an undeniable love for her people, painted a picture of a civilization not defined by their technological prowess, but by their profound connection to everything around them. Victor listened, entranced. For the first time since setting foot on Nyra, he saw its inhabitants not as adversaries or simpletons, but as a people with a rich heritage, fighting desperately to preserve their way of life against an overwhelming force. When Lyra finished, the room fell silent, save for the crackling of emra in the burner. Victor felt as if a veil had been lifted from his eyes. The mission he had undertaken, once so clear in its objectives, now seemed mired in shades of gray he had not anticipated. "Thank you, Lyra," he said softly, his voice tinged with newfound respect and a burgeoning resolve. "You have given me much to think about." Lyra nodded, her expression inscrutable. "Perhaps, Commander Marquez, the next time you think about your mission, you will see not just the land you came to conquer, but the lives you came to change." As she walked away, leaving Victor to his thoughts, the seeds of doubt planted by her stories began to germinate in his mind. In the shadowed room on a war-torn planet, the journey toward redemption for Victor Marquez had quietly begun. In the dim light of the Nerian healing chamber, the walls echoed with the soft, rhythmic drip of water from the mossy crevices. Victor lay on a bed of woven reeds, his body battered but slowly healing under the careful ministrations of Lyra, the Nerian nurse whose presence had become both a balm and a torment to his conscience. Victor watched as Lyra prepared a poultice from the bright, fragrant herbs that grew abundantly on Nyra. Her movements were fluid and practiced, each step performed with a reverence that suggested these were not mere plants, but sacred gifts from her world. She noticed Victor's gaze and met his eyes with a gentle smile. "Your people must see these plants as little more than resources to be harvested," she said, not unkindly, as she applied the poultice to his wounds. "But to us, they are life. Each one plays a part in the harmony of Naira." Her words stirred something within Victor. He had been trained to view the universe through the lens of utility and strategy, yet here, in the gentle care of the Nereians, he found a perspective that challenged every battle-hardened belief. "Why do you help me?" Victor asked, his voice hoarse. "After all we've done—" Lyra paused, her hands still. "It is our way," she replied simply, "to heal, to nurture, to protect. It gives us strength, knowing we remain true to ourselves, even when faced with darkness." As the days passed, each session with Lyra became a lesson in Nerian culture. She spoke of the whispering winds, gentle breezes said to carry the wisdom of ancestors. She described the great harmony, a philosophy of balance and respect for all life that guided her people's decisions. Victor found himself wrestling with the harsh dichotomy of his mission and the reality before him. The Nerians, with their deep connection to their world and each other, contrasted starkly against the image painted by his superiors of a primitive people hoarding valuable resources. One evening, as Nera's twin moons cast silvery shadows across the chamber, Lyra showed Victor a small, luminescent stone. "This is a heart of Naira," she explained. "It reminds us that we are never alone in the universe, that we share a common heartbeat with all creation." Holding the stone, Victor felt its warm pulse, as if it synchronized with his own heart. It was a moment of profound connection, blurring the lines between human and alien, conqueror and healer. "How can we claim to be advanced, to be civilized, when we ignore such wisdom?" Victor murmured, more to himself than to Lyra. Lyra placed her hand over his, her touch light but filled with an unspoken understanding. "Many paths lay before one. Commander," she said softly, "every choice leads to different destinies. Perhaps you are here to learn, to grow." That night, Victor lay awake long after Lyra had left, the heart of Naira glowing softly by his side. The stories she had shared, the serenity of her world, weighed heavily on him. In the stillness, the whispers of the ancestors seemed to drift through the air, calling him to a higher purpose. As dawn broke over Naira, painting the sky with hues of gold and crimson, a decision crystallized in Victor's mind. He could no longer be an instrument of destruction against a people who had shown him nothing but kindness and wisdom. The war he had waged seemed now a distant echo, a path forsaken. Victor knew the road ahead would be fraught with peril, both from his own kind and from the challenges of siding with the Nerians. Yet, as the sun rose, casting light on paths untaken, he felt a resolve strengthening within him, born of new beliefs and the unexpected hope that perhaps he could help lead the way to peace. The cold earthen floor of the Nerian cell was far from the comfort of the military bunks Victor Marquez was accustomed to, yet it cradled him in a way that felt unnervingly maternal. As the alien night fell, the pulsating glow of bioluminescent plants outside cast eerie, dancing shadows across the walls of his confinement. He lay awake, staring into the nothingness, his mind grappling with conflicting loyalties and the unraveling of a life he once knew. Victor's thoughts wandered back to Earth, to the parades and the medals, to the salutes and the proud faces of his superiors. He had been a hero, a defender of humanity's expansive reach into the stars. But here on Naira, amid the cries of a besieged planet, such titles tasted like ash in his mouth. It was Lyra, the Nerian nurse, who had unknowingly ignited this storm within him. Each day, she tended to his wounds with a gentleness that defied the brutality of the war outside. Her hands, though alien in their slight webbing and the faint shimmer of her skin, brought not only healing but a torrent of unspoken questions that flooded his conscience. Tonight, as if sensing his unrest, Lyra had remained after her usual rounds. She sat beside him, her figure a silhouette against the bioluminescent light. "Victor," she began, her voice a melody that seemed to harmonize with the night sounds of Naira. "You have seen us, truly seen us, Not as the invaders describe us, but as beings who love and cherish our world just as humans cherish theirs. Why then do you fight for those who seek to strip it away? Her words stung, not because of any malice, but because of the truth they carried. Victor turned to face her, his eyes searching hers for the condemnation he felt he deserved. But he found none, only sadness and a plea for understanding. Lyra, I was a soldier sworn to follow orders, trained to believe that what we did was for the greater good of humanity. His voice faltered. But what good is there in destruction, in the displacement of a people so rich in culture and life? Lyra's hand reached out, touching his lightly, a gesture that transcended the vast gulf between their species. Perhaps, she whispered, the greatest battles we fight are not against others but against the darkness within ourselves. Her words settled over him like the first quiet after a storm. Victor knew then that he could no longer be the instrument of humanity's avarice. The dawn was nearing, and with it, the time for choices that would define him. As the first light of Naira's sun began to seep into the cell, Victor stood, his decision cementing with each passing moment. He faced Lyra, his resolve clear. I will stand with you, he declared, not as a conqueror, but as an ally. I will fight, not for the plunder of your world, but for its preservation. I will help you lead your people to victory. Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting the first rays of the sun, eyes filled with a mix of surprise and newfound hope. Then let us prepare, she said, for the road to peace is paved with battles, and we will need every shred of your knowledge and strength to face what comes next. In the days that followed, Victor worked alongside the Nerian resistance, sharing his tactical expertise and learning their strategies. The soldiers he once commanded observed his transformation with a mixture of shock and admiration. Many, swayed by his conviction, joined his cause, bolstering the Nerian forces with their skills and fortitude. The camp buzzed with activity, a hive of shared purpose. His heart, though heavy with the weight of his past actions, also burned with a fervent desire for redemption, a redemption found not through the salvation offered by distant commanders, but through the forgiveness and acceptance of those he had once sought to conquer. In that bustling camp, under the twin moons of Naira, Victor Marquez, the commander, died. In his place rose Victor, the defender of Naira, bound not by orders or allegiance to a flag, but by a profound connection to the people and the planet he now called his home.